who came to town maybe twice a year to sell furs and buy supplies, who'd once killed 3 claim jumpers with his bare hands, or so the story went. "I said, you coming?" His voice was gentler this time. She found herself nodding. "Good." He turned back to Victor. "We got a problem. You know where to find me." "Oh, I'll find you." Victor's smile returned, but it was all teeth now. "Count on it." Rowan didn't respond. He just walked toward the door, and somehow Marla's feet started moving, following him. The crowd parted again, and she could feel their eyes burning into her back, judging, wondering, pitying. Poor Marla Whitaker, sold off to a mountain savage. The night air hit her like a slap, cold, clear. She gasped, realizing she'd been holding her breath. Rowan was already halfway to a horse. No, 2 horses. A big roan gelding and a smaller mare. "You ride?" he asked. Yes, a little." "Good enough." He untied the mare, brought her over. "This is Clover. She's gentle." Marla stared at the horse, then at the man. "I don't understand." "Don't have to understand tonight. Just have to mount up." "But why did you Because Victor Hale's a bastard who was about to do something evil, and I had the money to stop it." He said it like it was the simplest thing in the world. "Now we can stand here talking until he works up the courage to come after us, or we can ride. Your choice." It wasn't really a choice. Marla grabbed the saddle horn and tried to pull herself up. Failed. Tried again. Her dress caught under her boot, and she nearly fell. Without a word, Rowan's hands came around her waist, huge hands that could probably palm her head like a melon, and lifted. She was airborne for half a second before landing in the saddle. He made it look effortless, like she weighed nothing, like she wasn't the fat girl everyone laughed at. He swung onto his own horse, gathering the reins. "You got family in town? Anyone you need to say goodbye to?" She shook her head. Her father had been the last, and now he was gone. "All right then." He clicked his tongue, and the roan started walking. Clover followed automatically. They rode through Red Hollow in silence, past the general store where she'd bought flour last week, past the church where they'd held her father's funeral, past the boarding house where Mrs. Chen had told her, kindly but firmly, that she'd need to find other arrangements by month's end. Nobody stopped them. A few people watched from windows, but that was all. The town ended abruptly. Civilization just stopped at a certain point, giving way to scrubland and darkness. The moon was half full, providing enough light to see the road ahead. A rough track that wound north toward the mountains. After a mile, Rowan spoke. "You scared?" Marla considered lying. "Yes." "That's smart." He glanced back at her. "I ain't gonna hurt you if that's what you're scared of, just so we're clear." "Then what do you want with me?" "Nothing." "You paid $1,200 for nothing?" "I paid $1,200 to keep Victor Hale from getting his hands on something he wanted." A pause. "Different thing." They rode on. Marla's mind spun. This made no sense. Men didn't do things for nothing, especially not men who lived alone in the mountains, counting out fortunes like it was pocket change. "My father," she said suddenly. "Did you know him?" "Met him a few times. He came prospecting up near my territory sometimes." Rowan's voice was neutral. "Seemed decent enough." "He died 3 weeks ago. They said it was his heart." "I heard." "I don't think it was his heart." This made Rowan turn in his saddle, studying her face. "What do you think it was?" "I think someone killed him." The words came out in a rush. "He found something, I don't know what, but the last few months he was different, excited, secretive. He'd go out for days at a time and come back looking over his shoulder. And then one morning I found him outside our house, just lying there. No blood, no wounds. But the look on his face—" She trailed off, remembering, the terror frozen in his eyes. "Why didn't you tell the sheriff?" "I did. He said I was imagining things, that my father had always been sickly, and grief was making me see conspiracies where there weren't any." Her hands tightened on the reins. "But I know what I know." Rowan faced forward again. For a long time he didn't speak, then, "Your father found a gold claim, big one. He filed it under a false name, probably because he knew what would happen if word got out. But someone found out anyway." Marla's heart stuttered. "How do you—" "Because 3 men came to my cabin 2 weeks ago, asking if I'd seen Joseph Whitaker around. asking real friendly like, with guns on their hips and murder in their eyes. I told them no, and they left. He shifted in the saddle. Next day I went to town and heard he was dead. The pieces clicked together with awful clarity. They killed him for the claim. Probably. And me? Why did Victor? Because you're the heir. Legal heir to anything he owned, including claims filed under any name. They need you dead or controlled. Rowan's voice was grim. Victor's method was control. Make you his. Make the claim his. Nice and legal on paper. Marla felt sick. So you saved me. I delayed things, he corrected. Victor ain't gonna let this go. Neither are whoever hired him, which means you got enemies you don't even know about, all wanting something you probably can't find. I don't even know where the claim is. I know. She blinked. You do? Your father showed me. Not the whole thing, but enough. He was scared, near the end, wanted someone to know in case something happened. Rowan glanced back. Guess his instincts were right. The road had narrowed to a trail, climbing steadily. Pine trees crowded in on either side, their branches creating tunnels of shadow. Clover's hooves found purchase on the rocky ground without much guidance from Marla. So what happens now? She asked quietly. Now we ride about 3 more hours. Then we get to my place and you sleep. Tomorrow we figure out the rest. Just like that? Just like that. But nothing was ever just like anything, Marla knew. There was always a catch, always a price. She'd spent her whole life being the burden. The daughter who ate too much and cost too much, and would never marry because who'd want her? The girl whose own mother had looked at her with disappointment, like Marla's very existence was an insult. And now this stranger had paid more money than most people earned in 5 years, had thrown it down like it meant nothing, all to take her away from… what? A terrible fate, yes. But to what? You can jump off that horse anytime you want, Rowan said, startling her. Go back to town if that's what you're thinking. Are you reading my mind? Don't have to. You got the look of someone doing math in their head, trying to figure out if the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. He shrugged. Happens I ain't a devil. But you don't know that yet. So why should I trust you? Shouldn't. Not yet. He was quiet for a moment. But ask yourself this. If I wanted to hurt you, why pay for the privilege? Could have just waited until you were on Victor's ranch and taken you from there. Would have been easier and free. It was sound logic, cold, but sound. Unless you want something else, she said, something worth $1,200. If I wanted the claim, I could have taken it from your father. He trusted me, stupidly. Could have put a knife in his back and filed it under my own name. Rowan's voice was flat. Didn't, though. They climbed higher. The air thinned, grew colder. Marla pulled her shawl tighter. An hour passed. Then another. Her legs ached from riding, and her mind ached from thinking in circles. Every time she tried to make sense of the night's events, she came back to the same impossible fact. This man had saved her, expecting nothing in return. Nobody did that. Especially not for women like her. The trail leveled out, following a ridge line. Through gaps in the trees, Marla could see the valley below. Red hollows lights like scattered fireflies in the darkness. Beautiful, ain't it? Rowan said. From up here you can't see the ugly parts, just the lights. Ugly parts make up most of it. True for most places. He guided his horse around a fallen log. People too. They descended the other side of the ridge into a different valley entirely. This one was narrower, hemmed in by steep slopes. A creek ran down its center, chattering over stones. The trail followed it closely. Marla was nodding off in the saddle when Rowan finally stopped. We're here. She lifted her head, blinking. At first she saw nothing but more trees and darkness. Then her eyes adjusted, and she picked out a structure tucked against the base of the valley wall. Not a shack, like she'd expected, but an actual cabin. Log walls, stone chimney, windows with real glass. It's nice, she said, surprised. Don't sound so shocked. But there was amusement in his voice. He dismounted, then came around to help her down. This time she noticed how careful he was, his hands firm but gentle, lowering her slowly until her feet found the ground. Her legs nearly buckled. 3 hours of riding after months of barely leaving her house. Easy. His hand stayed on her elbow. Give yourself a minute. She did, breathing in the mountain air. It smelled different up here, cleaner, like the world hadn't been touched by people yet. Rowan led the horses to a lean-to behind the cabin, working efficiently in the darkness. Marla stood there, useless and uncertain, until he came back. "Inside," he said. "You're dead on your feet." The cabin's interior was dim until he lit a lamp. Warm light spilled across a single large room. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a table and chairs nearby. Shelves lined another wall, crammed with books, more books than Marla had ever seen in one place outside of a library. A bed sat in the far corner made up with furs and wool blankets. Another corner held a smaller cot. "You take the bed," Rowan said, already moving to the fireplace. "I'll sleep over there." "I can't take your bed." "You can and you will. I've slept on the cot plenty." He was stacking kindling, his movements practiced. "There's water in the pitcher if you want to wash up. Necessary's out back. Follow the path about 20 feet. Within minutes, he had a fire going. The warmth crept through the room, chasing away the night's chill. Marla stood there, still holding her shawl, feeling like she'd stumbled into someone else's life. "Ain't you tired?" Rowan asked, looking up from the fire. I don't understand any of this." "What's to understand? You're safe. That's enough for tonight. But tomorrow I'll make breakfast, and we'll talk about the claim and Victor and all the rest." He stood, wiping his hands on his pants. "But you've had a hell of a night, and you need sleep more than answers." He was right. Exhaustion pulled at her like an undertow. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For everything." Rowan nodded once. "Get some rest, Miss Whitaker." She moved to the bed, sitting on its edge. The furs were soft, the blankets heavy. She unlaced her boots, letting them fall to the floor, and lay back fully clothed. The last thing she saw before sleep took her was Rowan settling onto the cot, his large frame making the small bed look ridiculous. He didn't seem to care. Within moments, his breathing had evened out. Marla closed her eyes. For the first time in weeks, maybe years, she felt something almost like peace. What? She woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Sunlight streamed through the windows, bright and insistent. Marla sat up, disoriented. For a moment she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The saloon, Victor, the gold, the ride through darkness. Rowan stood at the stove, his back to her. He'd taken off his coat, revealing a worn flannel shirt that strained across his shoulders. His hair was still tied back, exposing the scar on his temple. "Morning," he said without turning around. "Coffee's ready if you want it." Marla stood carefully. Her legs protested, stiff from yesterday's ride. She made her way to the table, where 2 cups sat waiting. The coffee was strong enough to strip paint, but it was hot and real. "How'd you sleep?" Rowan asked. "Better than expected." She sipped the coffee, grateful for its warmth. "You?" "Like always." He turned, sliding bacon onto 2 tin plates. "Eggs?" "I don't want to take your food." "Didn't ask if you wanted to take it. Asked if you want eggs." He cracked 4 into the pan without waiting for an answer. "You're going to eat. Not negotiable." Something about his tone made arguing seem pointless. Marla nodded. They ate in silence. The eggs were cooked perfectly, the bacon crisp. Simple food, but more than she'd had in days. Her father's death had killed her appetite, and grief had a way of making even eating feel impossible. But this morning, with sunlight warming the cabin and a strange man treating her like a person rather than a problem, she found herself actually hungry. "So," Rowan said, mopping up egg with a piece of bread, "your father's claim. You know anything specific about it? Location, vein size, anything?" Marla shook her head. "He never told me details. I didn't even know he'd found something until yesterday." "Yes?" Rowan leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You got any papers, documents, maps, letters?" "Everything was in our house, but after he died, men came through. They said they were from the bank, looking for assets." Her throat tightened. "They took everything that mattered, left the furniture and clothes, but anything that might have been important, papers, his journals, even his old tools, gone." "Of course." Rowan's expression darkened. "They were looking for proof of the claim. Probably destroyed whatever they found or kept it to file under their own names." "So it's lost." Whatever my father found. The paperwork's lost. The gold ain't. He stood, moving to one of the bookshelves. After a moment of searching, he pulled down a leather-bound journal and brought it back to the table. Your father was smart. Paranoid, but smart. He showed me the location a few months back, made me memorize it. Said if anything happened to him, someone should know. He opened the journal to a page covered in his own rough handwriting. A map, sketched from memory. Landmarks labeled in terse script. It's about 15 miles east of here, Rowan explained. In a canyon most people avoid because the terrain's a bitch and the rumors say it's cursed, which is probably why your father chose it. Nobody goes there. Marla leaned closer, trying to make sense of the map. How much gold are we talking about? From what he described, enough to make you rich, enough to make anyone who knew about it willing to kill for it. Rowan's finger traced a line on the map. The vein runs along this ridge here. He'd barely started extracting when he realized how big it was. That's when he got scared and filed it under a false name. John Williams, generic enough that it wouldn't raise flags. Rowan closed the journal. But he made a mistake. He told someone. Or someone followed him. Hard to keep a secret when you're hauling gold out of a mountain. Marla's hands trembled around her coffee cup. So what do we do? We? Nothing. You stay here, safe. I go verify the claim's still there, make sure nobody's jumped it. Then we figure out next steps. I'm coming with you. No. It's my claim, my inheritance. It's also about 15 miles of rough terrain, most of it straight up. Rowan's voice was patient but firm. You'd slow me down, and if someone's watching the site, they'd spot us twice as easy with 2 people. I can ride. You can barely walk right now. I saw you limping to the table. He wasn't being cruel, just factual. Give yourself time to heal up. Few days, maybe a week. Then we'll talk about going together. Marla wanted to argue, wanted to insist that she was capable, that she wasn't the helpless burden everyone thought she was. But her legs throbbed, and the thought of climbing onto a horse made her want to cry. Fine, she said quietly, but I'm not staying here doing nothing. Didn't expect you to. Rowan stood, gathering the plates. There's plenty to do around here. Firewood needs splitting, garden could use weeding, cabin needs about 100 small repairs. You're welcome to tackle any of it. He said it casually, like offering her chores was the most natural thing in the world. Not like she was a guest, not like she was bought property, just like she was someone who could help. It was strange, foreign, and somehow exactly what she needed. I can do that, she said. Good. He moved to the door, grabbing his coat. I'll be gone most of the day. Gonna scout the claim, check for activity. You need anything? There's food in the pantry and wood by the fireplace. Don't open the door for anybody, and I mean anybody. Someone comes knocking, you stay quiet and stay hidden. Fear flickered through her. You think Victor would come here? I think Victor's not stupid, and he knows where I live. Whether he's stupid enough to try something is another question. Rowan pulled on his coat, checking the knife at his belt. Just be smart. I'll be back before dark. He left, and the cabin felt suddenly huge and empty. Marla sat at the table, finishing her coffee, listening to the sounds of Rowan preparing his horse outside. Then hoofbeats, fading into the distance. Silence. She stood wincing at her protesting muscles and looked around the cabin with new eyes. In the chaos of last night and the fog of this morning, she hadn't really taken it in. But now, alone, she could see the details. The books on the shelves weren't just random volumes. They were organized, philosophy next to natural history, farming manuals beside poetry collections. Someone had read these books, cared about them. The bed she'd slept in was handmade, the joints fitted with precision. The table was scarred but solid, built to last generations. This wasn't a hermit's cave. This was a home. Marla moved to the window, looking out at the valley. Morning sun painted everything gold. The creek sparkled. Pine trees marched up the slopes in perfect ranks. Beautiful, isolated, safe. For now. She turned back to the room, rolling up her sleeves. If she was going to be here, and it seemed she was, she might as well make herself useful. The garden was first. A small plot behind the cabin, currently overrun with weeds. Marla found tools in the lean-to and set to work, pulling up invasive plants and loosening the soil around what looked like potato plants and onions. The work was hard. Her hands, soft from months of doing nothing but grieving, blistered quickly. Her back ached. Sweat soaked through her dress despite the cool mountain air. But it felt good, purposeful. By midday, she'd cleared half the garden and started on the firewood. Rowan had left a pile of logs that needed splitting. She found an axe, tested its weight, and swung. The blade bit into the wood, but didn't split it. She tried again, and again. On the fourth try, the log finally cracked apart. It took her an hour to split what Rowan could probably do in 10 minutes, but she did it. That afternoon, she swept the cabin floor, organized the pantry, and patched a tear in one of the curtains using a needle and thread she found in a drawer. Small things, insignificant things, but they were hers, her choices, her work, her contribution. As the sun lowered toward the western peaks, Marla sat on the cabin's porch, just a few rough-hewn boards with a step down to the ground, and looked at what she'd accomplished. The garden was half-weeded. The firewood was split and stacked. The cabin was cleaner. Not much, but more than she'd done in months. She was still sitting there when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Her heart jumped. Rowan had said before dark. The sun was still up, but barely. She stood, ready to run inside and hide, when she recognized the big roan horse. Rowan rode into the clearing, looking tired but unharmed. He dismounted, leading the horse to water before noticing her on the porch. His eyes swept over the garden, the firewood, then back to her. "You've been busy," he said. "You told me I could help. Didn't think you'd actually do it." He tied up the horse, then walked over. "Most people say they want to help, then find reasons not to. I'm not most people." "No," he agreed quietly. "You're not." They went inside. Rowan built up the fire while Marla heated leftover stew from the pantry. They ate together as darkness fell, and she realized this was becoming a routine already. Morning coffee, evening meal, silence that didn't feel awkward. "The claim's still there," Rowan said finally. "No signs of recent activity, but there's tracks around the area, multiple horses, maybe 4 or 5 days old. Someone's been looking." "For the gold?" "For the site. They know it's out there, but your father hid it well." He wiped his bowl with bread. "We got time, but not much. Once Victor realizes you're not coming back, he'll start searching in earnest." "What do we do?" "We?" He raised an eyebrow. "You said in a few days we'd talk about going together." "I said maybe. Depends on if you can sit a horse without crying." Marla flushed. "I wasn't crying." "No, but you were close." His voice wasn't mocking, though. "Look, I'm not saying you're weak. I'm saying you're untrained. There's a difference." "Then train me." The words surprised her as much as they seemed to surprise him. Rowan set down his bowl, studying her face. "You serious? You said I'd slow you down because I'm not ready for rough terrain, so make me ready." She met his gaze, refusing to look away. "I've spent my whole life being told what I can't do, what I'm not suited for. I'm tired of it." Being tired of something and being able to change it are different things. "I know, but I have to try." Her hands clenched in her lap. "That claim is mine by right. My father died protecting it. I'm not going to sit here like a decoration while you risk your life for my inheritance." Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. It transformed his face, softening the hard edges. "All right," he said. "We start tomorrow." "Really?" "Really. But I'm warning you now, I don't coddle. You want to learn to survive out here? I'll teach you. But it's going to hurt, and you're going to want to quit, and I'm not going to let you." "I won't quit." "We'll see." He stood, stretching. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow starts early." Marla helped clean up, then retreated to the bed. But sleep didn't come easily. Her mind raced with possibilities and fears in equal measure. She'd asked for this, demanded it even. But what if she couldn't do it? What if her body failed her the way society said it would? No. She pushed the thoughts away. Tomorrow she'd find out what she was capable of. Tonight she just needed to rest. Outside, an owl called. The fire crackled softly, and somewhere in the darkness, Victor Hale was planning his next move. But here, in this cabin at the edge of the world, Marla Whitaker closed her eyes and dreamed of becoming stronger. Dawn came too early and too cold. Marla woke to Rowan shaking her shoulder, his voice cutting through sleep like a blade. "Up! We're burning daylight!" She groaned, every muscle in her body screaming protest from yesterday's work. It's still dark. Sun's coming. That's close enough. He moved away, already dressed. Get up, get dressed. Meet me outside in 5 minutes. 5? But he was already gone, the door closing behind him with a solid thunk. Marla dragged herself upright, her body feeling like it belonged to someone else. Someone older, someone who'd been trampled by horses. She fumbled into her clothes, the same black dress, now stained with dirt and sweat, and splashed cold water on her face from the pitcher. Outside, the world was caught in that strange, in-between moment where night hadn't quite surrendered today. Everything looked blue and fragile. Rowan stood in the clearing, 2 buckets at his feet. Each one was filled with rocks. Pick them up, he said. Marla stared at him. What? The buckets. Pick them up. She approached cautiously, grabbed the handles, and lifted. The buckets barely budged. Her arms strained, her shoulders burning. I can't. You can. You're just not trying hard enough. His voice was maddeningly calm. Again. She gritted her teeth and pulled. This time the buckets lifted maybe 6 inches off the ground before she had to drop them. The crash echoed across the valley. How much do these weigh? About 40 pounds each. Rowan walked over, picked up both buckets one-handed like they were empty, and carried them 20 feet before setting them down. Your turn. Get them from here to there. That's impossible. No, it's hard. Different thing. He crossed his arms. You wanted to be trained. This is training. Marla wanted to argue. Wanted to point out that this was ridiculous, that she'd never be strong enough, that her body wasn't built for this kind of work. But she'd asked for this. Demanded it. She grabbed the buckets again. It took her 15 minutes to move them 20 feet. She had to stop every few steps, gasping, her arms shaking. Sweat poured down her face despite the cold. Twice she nearly dropped them on her feet. But she did it. When the buckets finally reached their destination, she collapsed beside them, chest heaving. Rowan looked down at her. Good. Now take them back. You're joking. Do I look like I'm joking? He didn't. The next hour was torture. Back and forth across the clearing, hauling those cursed buckets. Her hands blistered, then the blisters popped, leaving raw patches that burned with every grip. Her shoulders felt like they were on fire. Her legs trembled, but she kept going. Finally, Rowan called to stop. Enough. Go drink some water. Marla stumbled to the cabin, gulped water from the pitcher until she thought she might be sick, then stumbled back out. Now we run, Rowan said. Run? 1/4 mile down the trail and back. I'll go with you. He started jogging before she could respond. Marla followed, her body already screaming that this was a terrible idea. The trail was rocky and uneven. Within 30 seconds, she was gasping. Within a minute, her side cramped. Rowan slowed, matching her pace. Breathe through your nose, out through your mouth, regular rhythm. She tried. It helped. Barely. They made it maybe 1/8 of a mile before she had to stop, hands on her knees, certain she was going to vomit. That's fine, Rowan said, not even winded. Walk it off, then we go again. Again. Did I stutter? They ran, if it could be called running, 4 more times. Each attempt she made it a little further before collapsing. By the end, she reached the 1/4 mile mark before her legs gave out entirely. Rowan caught her before she hit the ground. Easy. You're done for now. I didn't finish. You did more than I expected. He helped her walk back to the cabin. Most people would have quit after the buckets. Inside, he made her drink more water, then eat bread and cheese even though her stomach rebelled at the idea of food. Your body needs fuel. Eat. She forced it down. Rest for an hour, he said. Then we're going shooting. Shooting? You want to protect yourself, you need to know how to use a gun. He pulled a rifle from a rack on the wall, checking its mechanism. Can you shoot? My father taught me some, years ago. We'll see what you remember. The hour passed too quickly. Marla dozed in the chair by the fire, her body already stiffening into one solid ache. When Rowan shook her awake, she could barely stand. I know it hurts, he said, not unkindly. It's supposed to. Come on. He led her to a spot behind the cabin where he'd set up targets, pieces of wood propped against trees at varying distances. The closest was maybe 20 yards. The farthest was at least 100. Rowan handed her the rifle. It was heavier than she remembered, the metal cold even through her sleeves. "Show me what you know." Marla lifted the weapon, trying to remember her father's instructions from a decade ago. Butt against her shoulder, cheek against the stock, line up the sights. Her hands shook. "Breathe out, then squeeze," Rowan said quietly. She did. The rifle kicked hard against her shoulder, the crack of the shot echoing through the valley. The closest target remained untouched. Again! She fired 5 more times, missed every shot. "Your stance is wrong," Rowan said. He stepped behind her, adjusting her position with his hands. "Feet wider. Weight forward. Don't anticipate the recoil. That's why you're jerking the barrel up." His touch was impersonal, clinical, like a carpenter adjusting a tool. "Try again." This time when she fired, wood exploded from the nearest target. "Better," Rowan said. "Keep going." They spent 2 hours shooting. By the end, Marla could hit the close targets more often than she missed. The distant ones remained impossible, but Rowan seemed satisfied. "You've got decent instincts," he said, taking the rifle back. "Just need practice." "My shoulder's going to be black and blue." "Probably." He started walking back to the cabin. "But you'll live." That became the routine. Every morning before dawn, the buckets. Every day they got a little lighter. Not because Rowan reduced the weight, but because she got stronger. After a week, she could carry them the full distance without stopping. After 2 weeks, she could do it twice. The running got easier too, though easy was relative. She could make the 1/4 mile without collapsing, then 1/2 mile, then a full mile loop through the forest, following trails that wound up and down the valley slopes. Her body changed. Not dramatically, she didn't suddenly become slender or graceful, but the softness hardened into something more solid. Her arms developed definition she'd never seen before. Her legs stopped burning halfway up hills. The shooting improved too. Rowan taught her to account for wind, to judge distance, to breathe and squeeze rather than aim and yank. He taught her to reload fast, to clear jams, to maintain the weapon. "A gun's only useful if it works when you need it," he said, "and you always need it when it's wet or dirty or hasn't been cleaned in a week." He also taught her to fight. This was the worst part. Rowan would attack without warning, grab her from behind while she was cooking, sweep her legs while she was carrying water, come at her with a wooden knife while she was splitting wood. The first few times she froze, terror locking her muscles. "Fight back," he'd yell. "I don't care how, just do something." So she did. She kicked, scratched, bit, threw elbows into his ribs and knees toward his groin. None of it worked. He was too big, too experienced, but he made her try anyway. "Pain don't care if you're scared," he said after dropping her in the dirt for the 20th time that week. "You freeze, you die. Simple as that." She learned to pivot when grabbed, to drop her weight when pulled, to go for eyes and throat and knees, the soft targets that hurt regardless of size. One morning, 3 weeks into her training, Rowan came at her with the wooden knife while she was getting water from the creek. This time, instead of panicking, she ducked under his arm, hooked his ankle with her foot, and shoved hard. He went down. For a moment, they both just stared. Then Rowan started laughing, a deep, genuine sound she'd never heard from him before. "Finally," he said, getting up and dusting himself off. "Took you long enough." Marla couldn't help but smile. Her first victory. The evenings were different, quieter. They'd eat together, and Rowan would talk about the mountains, how to read weather, how to find water, which plants were edible, and which would kill you. How to move quietly, how to hide tracks, how to survive if everything went wrong. "Why are you teaching me all this?" she asked one night. "It's more than just preparing for the claim." Rowan was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. "Because the world's a hard place, and it's harder for women, especially women people have already decided are weak." He glanced at her. "You deserve the chance to prove them wrong." "You don't think I'm weak?" "I think you were never given the opportunity to be anything else." He leaned back in his chair. "Strength ain't about how you're born. It's about what you're willing to endure to become something different." Those words stayed with her. A month passed, then 5 weeks. The autumn air grew colder, carrying hints of the winter to come. Marla could see her breath in the mornings now. Frost covered the ground until the sun burned it away. She'd changed. Not just physically, though that was obvious enough. Her dresses barely fit anymore, tight across shoulders that had broadened with muscle. Her hands were calloused and scarred. Her face had tanned from hours spent outdoors, but the deeper changes were harder to see. The way she carried herself, straighter, steadier. The way she met people's eyes instead of looking down. The confidence that came from knowing she could run 5 miles, carry 80 pounds, and hit a target at 70 yards. One evening, Rowan looked up from his book and said, "You're ready?" Marla set down the knife she'd been sharpening. "Ready for what?" "The claim. Tomorrow we ride out, verify the site, and figure out what to do with it." Her heart jumped. "Really?" "You can handle the terrain now. You can shoot, fight, and think under pressure." He closed his book. "Besides, winter's coming. We wait much longer and the pass will be snowed in." "What about Victor?" "What about him? He's going to come for us eventually regardless. Might as well give him a reason." Rowan stood, stretching. "We leave at dawn. Pack light, ammunition, water, dried food, dress warm." That night Marla barely slept. Tomorrow they'd see her father's claim. The fortune he'd died protecting. The reason men had killed him and tried to enslave her. Tomorrow everything would change again. She rose before Rowan's usual wake-up call, already dressed and packed. He raised an eyebrow when he saw her waiting by the horses. "Eager?" "Terrified," she admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp." He swung into his saddle. "Let's go." They rode east as the sun came up, painting the mountains in shades of gold and rose. The trail was rough, exactly as Rowan had warned, but Marla found she could handle it now. Her body had learned to move with the horse, to anticipate shifts in terrain. By midday, they'd climbed into higher country. The trees thinned out, giving way to rocky slopes and patches of scrub brush. The air was thin enough that breathing took effort. "There," Rowan said, pointing to a narrow canyon cutting between 2 peaks. "That's where we're headed." The canyon looked like a wound in the earth, dark, forbidding, the kind of place that made people nervous without knowing why. They dismounted at the canyon's mouth, tying the horses to a stunted pine. "From here we go on foot," Rowan said, pulling his rifle from its scabbard. "Stay close, watch where you step." The canyon was worse than it looked. Loose rocks made every step treacherous. The walls pressed in on either side, blocking most of the sunlight. It smelled of old stone and something else, something that made Marla's skin prickle. They'd gone maybe half a mile when Rowan stopped, holding up his hand. "What?" Marla whispered. "Tracks." He knelt, examining the ground. "Fresh, maybe 2 days old." "How many?" "3 horses, moving slow, searching." He stood, scanning the canyon walls. "They haven't found it yet, but they're close." They continued more carefully now, Rowan leading with his rifle ready. Every sound seemed amplified, the crunch of gravel, the whisper of wind through the rocks, Marla's own heartbeat pounding in her ears. The canyon opened abruptly into a small amphitheater, maybe 50 yards across. One wall had collapsed at some point, creating a slope of broken rock that climbed toward the rim high above. And there, tucked into a crack in the far wall, was a dark opening. A cave. "That's it," Rowan said quietly. They approached cautiously. The cave mouth was narrow, barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through, and partially hidden by a boulder that looked like it had been positioned deliberately. Rowan lit a lantern he'd brought, holding it high as they entered. The passage opened up quickly into a larger space, and there, gleaming in the lamplight, was gold. Not nuggets or dust, but an actual vein running through the rock. It started at chest height and disappeared into the ceiling, maybe 8 inches wide and glittering like a seam of treasure. "Jesus," Marla breathed. "Yeah." Rowan moved closer, running his hand along the vein. "Your father wasn't exaggerating. This is generational wealth. The kind wars get fought over." Marla stared at the gold, trying to process what she was seeing. This was what her father had found, what he'd hidden, what had gotten him killed. "How much is it worth?" "Extracted and refined? Hundreds of thousands, maybe more." Rowan turned to face her. "But here's the problem, getting it out. This ain't a surface deposit you can just dig up. This is hard rock mining. You'd need equipment, workers, time. And the second you start operating openly, every claim jumper and thief in the territory will descend like locusts. So what do we do?" Rowan stopped mid-sentence, his head snapping toward the cave entrance. Voices, outside, getting closer. "Swear I saw smoke from this direction. Waste of time. There's nothing out here but rocks and—" "Shut up," Both of you." That last voice was familiar, cold, authoritative. Victor Hale. Rowan grabbed Marla's arm, pulling her deeper into the cave. He extinguished the lantern, plunging them into darkness. "Don't move," he breathed in her ear. "Don't make a sound." They pressed against the back wall where shadows were thickest. Marla could hear her own breathing, too loud, too fast. She forced herself to slow it, to breathe through her nose like Rowan had taught her. Light appeared at the cave entrance, torchlight, flickering and orange. "Well, well," Victor's voice echoed through the space. "What do we have here?" Footsteps. 3 sets moving into the cave. "Boss, look at this!" One of the men had spotted the vein. Holy hell, that's gold! "I can see that, you idiot!" Victor's silhouette moved closer to the vein, torch held high. "So the old man wasn't lying after all." "How'd he find this place?" another voice asked. "Who cares? He's dead, his daughter's missing, and now this is ours." Victor ran his hand along the gold, same as Rowan had done moments before. "Get the surveying equipment from the horses. I want measurements, estimates on volume. We'll file the claim under my name tomorrow." "What about Vance? Word is he took the girl." "Vance is a problem for another day." Victor turned, and for a terrifying moment his eyes seemed to look straight at where Marla stood hidden. "Right now we secure this site. Post guards, set up camp. Nobody comes in or out without my say-so." The men moved to obey, filing back out of the cave. Victor lingered, staring at the gold. Then he smiled, a predator's smile, and followed his men out. Rowan and Marla stayed frozen for another minute, listening to the sounds of camp being established outside. Horses being unsaddled, equipment being unpacked, men arguing about who had to take first watch. "We're trapped," Marla whispered. "Not trapped, inconvenienced." Rowan's voice was calm, but she could feel the tension in his body. "This cave has another exit, farther back. Your father showed me." "Why didn't you mention that before?" "Didn't seem important until now." He took her hand, his palm rough and warm, and led her deeper into the darkness. The cave narrowed, the ceiling dropping until Rowan had to duck. Marla could barely see anything, just vague shapes in the ambient light filtering from behind them. "There's a crack in the back wall," Rowan murmured. "Tight squeeze, but it opens up on the other side of the ridge. We can circle around, get back to the horses." They felt their way forward, hands on cold stone. The crack, when they found it, looked impossibly small. "I'll go first," Rowan said. "Make sure it's clear. Then you follow." He handed her his rifle and squeezed into the opening. For a moment he was stuck, shoulders too broad. Then he twisted, exhaling hard, and pushed through. "Your turn!" His voice came from the other side, muffled. Marla approached the crack, her heart hammering. It looked even smaller up close. She was bigger than Rowan in some ways, wider through the hips, heavier in the middle. What if she got stuck? "Marla," Rowan's voice was firm. "You can do this, trust me." She took a breath and entered the crack sideways, the way he had. The stone pressed against her back and chest simultaneously. She couldn't expand her ribs fully to breathe. Panic fluttered in her throat. "Keep moving," Rowan encouraged. "Don't think about it, just push." She pushed. The rock scraped her arms, caught on her dress. For one horrible second she was stuck, unable to move forward or back. Then Rowan's hand grabbed her wrist and pulled. She popped through like a cork from a bottle, stumbling into his arms. "See?" he said. "Told you!" They were in a smaller cave, this one with a natural chimney that let in daylight from above. A tumble of rocks created a slope up to the opening. "Can we climb that?" Marla asked. "Have to." Rowan studied the slope. "It's not as bad as it looks. Just take your time." The climb was terrifying. The rock shifted under her weight, threatening to slide. Twice she slipped, catching herself by sheer luck, but Rowan climbed below her, ready to catch her if she fell. And somehow that made it bearable. They emerged on the ridge above the canyon, squinting in the sudden brightness. Below they could see Victor's camp. 3 horses, 2 tents, men moving around a campfire. "They're settling in for a while," Rowan observed, "which means they plan to work the claim. We can't let them steal it. We can't stop them, not directly. 3 armed men against 2 of us?" He shook his head. "We need help, legal help." "The sheriff works for Victor." "The territorial marshal doesn't." Rowan started moving along the ridge, away from the camp. There's a marshal station in Copper Falls, about 40 miles north. We file the proper claim there, get legal protection, and then Victor can't touch it without risking federal charges. That'll take days. 3, maybe 4. Faster if we push hard. He glanced back at her. Can you handle it? Could she? A week ago, the answer would have been no. But now, with muscles that didn't quit and lungs that had learned to handle thin air, she thought maybe she could. Yes, she said. They made it back to their horses without being spotted. Rowan checked the saddles quickly, then swung up onto his roan. We ride hard and stop only when we have to, he said. Victor will figure out we were there eventually. When he does, he'll come after us. Let him try. Rowan looked at her, something like pride flickering in his eyes. That's the spirit. Let's move. They rode north as the sun began its descent, pushing the horses as fast as the terrain allowed. The country here was wild and empty, just mountains and sky, and the occasional eagle circling overhead. By nightfall, they'd covered maybe 15 miles. Rowan called a halt in a small valley with a stream running through it. We'll camp here, he said. No fire, too visible. They ate dried meat and hard bread in the darkness, huddled in their coats against the cold. The stars came out, more than Marla had ever seen, turning the sky into a river of light. You did good today, Rowan said quietly. I almost got us caught. But you didn't. You stayed quiet. You trusted me. And you got through that crack even though you were scared. He was just a shape in the darkness, but she could hear the approval in his voice. A month ago, you couldn't have done any of that. A month ago, I couldn't have done anything. That ain't true. You were always capable. You just needed someone to stop telling you that you weren't. Marla pulled her coat tighter. Why did you really buy me, Rowan? He was quiet for a long time, long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then, I told you, because Victor's a bastard, and I had the money to stop him. That's not the whole truth. No, he admitted, it's not. Another pause. I knew your father, not well, but enough. And I knew what he'd found, and I knew someone killed him for it. When I heard Victor was coming for you, I put it together. Figured you were either part of the plan or a loose end they needed to tie up. He shifted and she heard rocks crunch under his weight. Either way, you deserve better than what was coming. You could have just warned me, told me to run. Where would you have run to? You had no money, no skills, no one to help you. His voice was matter-of-fact. This way, you're alive, you're learning, and you've got a fighting chance. At what cost to you? $1,200 and some inconvenience. He sounded almost amused. I've spent more on worse causes. They lapsed into silence. Marla lay back, looking up at the stars, and tried to remember the last time she'd felt this strange combination of exhaustion and… what? Not quite happiness. Not yet. But something close. Purpose, maybe. For the first time in her life, she was becoming someone she could respect. Sleep came easier than expected, despite the hard ground and cold air. When Rowan shook her awake hours later, the sky was just beginning to lighten. Up, he said. We've got a long day ahead. They rode through the dawn and into full morning, stopping only to water the horses. The terrain gradually shifted from mountains to foothills, the trees changing from pine to aspen. Around midday, they crested a rise and saw smoke in the distance. Copper Falls, Rowan said. We'll be there by sunset if we keep this pace. But they'd barely started down the slope when Rowan pulled up short, his hand going to his rifle. What? Marla asked. Riders, behind us. He pointed back the way they'd come. Marla turned. At first she saw nothing. Then the sun glinted off something metal, maybe a mile back. 3 riders, coming fast. Victor? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Who else? Rowan kicked his horse into a gallop. Ride. Don't look back. Just ride. They flew down the slope, the horse's hooves throwing up clouds of dust. Marla clung to the saddle, trusting Clover to find her footing. Behind them, shouts, the crack of a rifle shot, distant but unmistakable. They're shooting at us, Marla yelled. Just keep going. Another shot, closer this time. Marla heard the bullet whine past, striking a rock somewhere to her left. The horses were tiring, foam flecking their necks. But Copper Falls was visible now. a scatter of buildings in a valley ahead. "Almost there!" Rowan shouted. A third shot. This one hit Clover. The horse screamed, a horrible, human sound, and went down hard. Marla flew from the saddle, hitting the ground so hard the air exploded from her lungs. For a moment she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Then Rowan was there, hauling her to her feet. "Can you run?" She nodded, gasping. "Then run!" They sprinted down the trail, Rowan half-dragging her. Behind them, the riders were closing. Marla could hear their horses, their voices. "There! Get them!" Rowan spun, bringing his rifle up. He fired 3 times in quick succession. One of the riders fell, the other 2 pulled up, taking cover. "Go!" He shoved Marla forward. "Get to town! Find the marshal!" "I'm not leaving you!" "Wasn't asking." He fired again, buying them seconds. They ran together now, stumbling down the last stretch of trail. The town was close, close enough to see people in the street, close enough to see the marshal's office with its distinctive star painted on the door. Victor and his remaining man broke cover, charging after them. Rowan stopped, turned, and fired his last round. The bullet caught Victor's horse in the chest. The animal went down, throwing Victor hard. But the last rider was still coming, his pistol raised. Marla saw it happen in slow motion. The rider aiming, Rowan trying to reload, his hands fumbling with the mechanism. The pistol firing. Rowan jerked backward, blood blooming across his shoulder. "No!" Marla screamed. The rider turned his gun toward her. She didn't think, didn't plan. Her body moved on pure instinct, the way Rowan had trained it to move. She drew the pistol from Rowan's belt, the one he'd taught her to shoot with, raised it, and fired. The rider fell from his horse, clutching his chest. Then there were people everywhere. Men from the town, running toward them with weapons. The marshal, an older man with silver hair and a badge, pushing through the crowd. "What in hell is going on here?" Marla dropped the gun, her hands shaking violently. "He's hurt, please. He's hurt." The marshal looked at Rowan, at the blood, at Victor Hale climbing to his feet 50 yards back. "Get the doctor," he barked at someone. Then to Marla, "You got a story, girl?" "I've got the truth," she said, and her voice didn't shake at all. "And I've got proof." The marshal's office smelled like old coffee and gun oil. Marla sat in a wooden chair that creaked every time she moved, watching the doctor work on Rowan's shoulder. Her hands still trembled, dried blood flaking off her knuckles. "Bullet went clean through," the doctor said, threading a needle. "You're lucky, Vance. Another inch to the right, and it would have hit the artery." Rowan didn't respond. His face was pale, jaw clenched tight as the needle pierced his skin. He'd refused laudanum, said he needed to stay clear-headed. Marshal Garrett stood by the window, arms crossed, watching Victor Hale pace in the cell across the hall. Victor's face was purple with rage, his hands gripping the bars. "This is illegal detention, Garrett. You've got no cause to hold me." "I got 3 dead men and 2 witnesses saying you tried to kill them," the marshal replied without looking over. "That's plenty of cause. Those men were claim jumpers. We were defending property. Property that ain't yours according to the young lady." Now Garrett turned, his eyes sharp. "Miss Whitaker's got documentation. You got a gun and a bad attitude. Know which one carries more weight with a federal judge?" Victor's knuckles went white on the bars. His eyes found Marla, and the hatred there was so pure it was almost physical. "You're a dead woman," he said quietly. "You know that, right? Soon as I get out of here, that's enough." Garrett moved to the cell, his hand on his pistol. "One more threat, and I'll add it to the charges." Victor smiled, showing teeth. "Wasn't a threat, Marshal. Just a fact." The doctor finished stitching and wrapped Rowan's shoulder with clean bandages. "Change these twice daily. Keep it dry. And for the love of heaven, don't do anything stupid for at least a week." "Define stupid," Rowan said. "Anything that involves getting shot at." The doctor packed his supplies. "I mean it, Vance. That shoulder needs time to heal, or you'll lose use of the arm." After the doctor left, Marshal Garrett pulled up a chair across from Marla. He was maybe 60, with the kind of weathered face that came from decades of dealing with the worst humanity had to offer, but his eyes were kind. "All right, Miss Whitaker, start from the beginning. Don't leave anything out." So she told him, all of it. Her father's death, the debt, Victor's plan to claim her, Rowan's intervention, the gold claim, the discovery that Victor had already found it, their flight to Copper Falls. Garrett listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes in a small book. And you shot one of his men, he said when she finished. Killed him. Yes. Her voice was steady. He was going to kill us. I believe you, but there'll be questions. An inquest, probably? Garrett leaned back. Self-defense is legal, but you'll have to prove it was necessary. I've got proof, Rowan said from the cot. His voice was rough with pain. Victor's been after that claim for months. He's got men all over the territory searching for it. Hell, half the people in Red Hollow know he wanted Marla dead, or controlled. Knowing and proving are different things. Garrett closed his notebook. But between the claim documentation, the witnesses who saw the chase, and Victor's own men turning on him, one of them's already singing like a canary in exchange for leniency. I think we got a case. How long before Victor goes to trial? Marla asked. Territorial court convenes in 3 weeks. Until then, he stays locked up. Garrett stood. You two should get some rest. There's a boarding house down the street, run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson. Clean rooms, decent food. Tell her I sent you. Marla helped Rowan to his feet. He swayed, steadying himself against the wall. Easy, she murmured. Lean on me. I'm fine. You're bleeding through the bandage. Lean on me. He did, reluctantly. Together they made their way out of the marshal's office into the fading daylight. Copper Falls was bigger than Red Hollow, but not by much. Maybe 300 people scattered across a main street and a handful of side roads. The boarding house was exactly where Garrett said it would be, a 2-story building with a painted sign that read Patterson's. Mrs. Patterson turned out to be a round woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She took one look at Rowan's bloody shoulder and tisked. Marshal send you? Yes, ma'am, Marla said. Then you're good for payment. Come on, I'll put you in adjoining rooms upstairs. She led them up a narrow staircase. Supper's at 6. You miss it. You go hungry. Water for washing is in the pitchers, necessaries out back. The rooms were small but clean. Rowan collapsed onto the bed in his, not bothering to remove his boots. Should I get the doctor back? Marla asked from the doorway. No, just need sleep. His eyes were already closing. Wake me if anything happens. What's going to happen? With Victor? Who knows? He shifted, grimacing. But men like him don't go down quiet. Even locked up, he's dangerous. Marla wanted to argue, to say that they were safe now, that the law would protect them, but she'd learned enough in the past 2 months to know better. She left Rowan sleeping and went to her own room. It had a bed, a washstand, and a small window overlooking the street. She poured water into the basin and scrubbed the blood from her hands, watching it turn the water pink. She'd killed a man today. The thought should have horrified her, should have made her sick with guilt or shame or something, but all she felt was a strange emptiness, like the space where the emotion should be was just hollow. He would have killed her, would have killed Rowan. That made it necessary, didn't it? She dried her hands and sat on the bed, suddenly exhausted down to her bones. That night she dreamed of the saloon in Red Hollow, of standing on the auction block while Victor circled. But in the dream, when Rowan threw down the gold, she didn't leave with him. She stayed frozen, unable to move, while Victor's hand closed around her throat. She woke gasping, the room dark except for moonlight through the window. A sound had woken her. Voices, outside. She moved to the window, peering down at the street. 3 men on horseback talking to someone in the shadows. She couldn't make out words, but something about their posture set her nerves on edge. Then one of them looked up, and moonlight caught his face. She didn't recognize him, but she recognized the type. Hard eyes, gun on his hip. The kind of man who killed for money. Marla grabbed her boots and ran to Rowan's room without bothering to lace them. He was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with his pistol in his good hand. You saw them too, he said. Who are they? Victor's insurance policy. Rowan stood, testing his shoulder. He winced, but moved anyway. Men like him always have backup plans. We need to move. Where? The marshal's one man in a town where half the people probably owe Victor money or favors. Rowan was checking his gun, counting rounds. We need to get back to the cabin. It's defensible, remote. We can hold out there until the trial. That's weeks away. We can't hide for weeks. We can if the alternative is dying tonight. He grabbed his coat with his good arm. Pack quick. We leave in 5 minutes. Marla wanted to argue, to say this was paranoia, that they were safe here, but she'd learned to trust Rowan's instincts. They'd kept her alive this long. She threw her few belongings into a bag and met him in the hallway. They crept down the stairs, avoiding the creaky steps, and slipped out the back door into an alley. The stable was 2 buildings down. Their horses, well, Rowan's horse, since Clover was dead, were in stalls at the back. Rowan moved to saddle the roan, cursing under his breath as his injured shoulder protested. "Let me," Marla said, pushing him aside gently. She'd learned to saddle a horse properly over the past weeks. The work went quick, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. "We'll have to ride double," Rowan said, "at least until we can get another horse." "I can walk." 40 miles? In the dark?" He shook his head. "We ride double." They led the horse out the back of the stable, staying in the shadows. The main street was quiet now, the riders gone, but Marla could feel eyes watching from somewhere. Rowan swung into the saddle, then reached down to pull her up behind him. She settled against his back, her arms around his waist, feeling the bandage beneath his shirt. "Hold on," he said, and kicked the horse into motion. They rode hard for the first hour, putting distance between themselves and Copper Falls. The moon was bright enough to see by, turning the landscape silver and black. When they finally slowed to rest the horse, Marla's arms ached from holding on. "You think they'll follow?" she asked. "Probably, but we've got a head start, and I know this country better than they do." Rowan shifted in the saddle. "We'll reach the cabin by tomorrow night if we push." They pushed. The next day was brutal. Riding double meant the horse tired faster, forcing them to stop more often. And every stop felt like giving their pursuers time to catch up. By afternoon, Rowan's shoulder was bleeding again, seeping through the bandages in his shirt. His face had gone gray with pain, but he refused to slow down. "We're close," he kept saying. "Just a few more miles." They reached the cabin as the sun was setting, painting the valley in shades of orange and red. Rowan practically fell from the saddle, catching himself against the horse's flank. "Inside," Marla said, supporting him. "Now." She got him to the cot and unwrapped his shoulder. The stitches had torn, blood flowing freely. She cleaned it as best she could with whiskey and water, then stitched it again using the needle and thread from the mending kit. Her hands shook the whole time, but the stitches held. Rowan passed out halfway through, which was probably a mercy. Marla worked by lamplight, finishing the job, then bandaging it tight. When she was done, she sat back, exhausted. The cabin felt different now. Not safe exactly, but familiar, like coming home after a long absence. She stood and went to the window, looking out at the darkening valley. They'd come. Victor's men, or whoever he'd hired. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but they'd come. And when they did, she'd be ready. The next morning, Rowan woke fevered. His skin was hot to the touch, his breathing shallow. "It's infected," Marla said, checking the wound. Red streaks radiated from the stitches, angry and swollen. "I'll be fine," Rowan mumbled. "You're not fine. You need a doctor." "Can't risk town. They'll be watching." His eyes focused on her with effort. "There's willow bark in the pantry. Make tea. And golden seal powder in the medicine box. Mix it with water, pack the wound." She did as he said, working quickly. The willow bark tea smelled bitter, but he drank it anyway. The golden seal paste she applied to the wound made him hiss with pain. "How long?" she asked. "How long before the fever breaks?" "Day? Maybe 2. He lay back, closing his eyes. "If it doesn't, it will." She said it with more confidence than she felt. That day stretched into the longest of Marla's life. She kept the fire going, made Rowan drink water and tea every few hours, changed his bandages when they soaked through. His fever climbed higher and he started talking in his sleep. Fragments about the war, about mountains, about things she couldn't understand. By nightfall, she was terrified he was going to die. She sat beside the cot, holding his hand, that massive, scarred hand that had pulled her from the crack in the cave, that had taught her to shoot, that had saved her life a dozen times over. "Don't you dare," she whispered. "Don't you dare leave me here alone." His hand twitched in hers, but he didn't wake. The second day, the fever broke. Rowan woke clear-eyed and weak, asking for water. Marla almost cried with relief. "How long was I out?" he asked. "Almost 2 days. Damn." He tried to sit up, failed. They could be here any time. They're not here yet. That's what matters. She helped him drink. You need rest, not worry. Can't rest if we're dead. But he lay back anyway, too weak to argue properly. Over the next week, Rowan slowly recovered. The fever stayed gone. The wound started healing properly. He graduated from the cot to walking around the cabin, then to short trips outside. And Marla prepared for war. She cleaned and loaded every gun in the cabin, 3 rifles, 2 pistols, and an old shotgun. She inventoried ammunition, making sure they had enough. She reinforced the door with an extra beam, checked that all the windows could be barred from inside. Rowan watched her work with something like approval. You've changed, he said one evening. Have I? The woman I pulled out of Red Hollow would have been praying for rescue. You're preparing to fight. Marla loaded another round into the rifle. The woman you pulled out of Red Hollow didn't know she could fight. And now? Now I know better. She set the rifle aside, meeting his gaze. They're coming for us, Rowan. Victor's not going to let this go, trial or no trial. And I'm done running. Running ain't cowardice. I didn't say it was, but I'm done with it anyway. She stood, moving to the window. This cabin, this valley, it's the first place I've ever felt like I belonged. I'm not giving it up without a fight. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then, all right, then we make our stand here. They spent the next few days turning the cabin into a fortress. Rowan, still weak but functional, showed her how to create fallback positions, where to place ammunition, how to create fields of fire that would give them the advantage. If they come at night, they'll try to burn us out, he said. So we keep buckets of water ready. If they come during the day, they'll try to get close using the trees for cover. We thin those trees. They cut down pines that were too close to the cabin, creating a clear killing field. Backbreaking work that left Marla's hands raw and blistered again. But she didn't complain. 2 weeks after they'd returned from Copper Falls, the first snow came. Marla woke to a world transformed, white and silent. She stood on the porch, watching fat flakes drift down from a gray sky. Winter's early this year, Rowan said, coming up behind her. Mountain's telling us something. What's it telling us? That we're running out of time. Snow like this will close the passes in a week. Maybe less. He pulled his coat tighter. Victor's men will come before then, or they'll have to wait until spring. So we have a week. At most. They came on the 6th day. Marla spotted them first, late afternoon, just as the light was starting to fade. 6 riders, moving up the valley in a loose formation. Rowan, she called, her voice steady. Company. He joined her at the window, swearing softly. 6. That's more than I expected. Can we handle 6? Depends on how good they are. He moved to the rifles, checking each one, and how smart they fight. The riders stopped about 200 yards out, just at the edge of rifle range. One of them, a tall man with a black coat, dismounted and walked forward, hands visible and empty. Rowan Vance, he called out. We need to talk. Nothing to talk about, Rowan shouted back. I think there is. My name's Carson. Victor Hale sent me to make you an offer. Not interested. Carson kept walking, closing the distance to maybe 100 yards. Just hear me out. No one has to die today. Rowan raised his rifle, sighting down the barrel. Stop right there or I'll drop you where you stand. Carson stopped. I'm unarmed. Just want to talk. Then talk from there. Victor's willing to pay. Carson's voice carried clearly across the snow. $50,000 for the girl and the claim documentation. You walk away rich. No one gets hurt. Marla felt her stomach clench. $50,000 was a fortune. More money than most people saw in a lifetime. Rowan didn't hesitate. Tell Victor to go to hell. Be reasonable, Vance. You're outnumbered, wounded, and it's 6 against 2. Take the money and live. My answer's no. Now get off my land. Carson stood there for another moment, then shrugged. Your funeral. He turned and walked back to his men. They conferred briefly. Then, as one, they spread out, forming a wide arc around the cabin. Here we go, Rowan muttered. He handed Marla a rifle. You take the south window. I've got north. They try to rush us. Aim for center mass and keep firing. Don't stop to see if you hit. Just keep shooting. Marla moved to her position, her heart hammering. Through the window, she could see 2 of the riders dismounting, using their horses for cover as they advanced. Wait for my signal, Rowan called. Let them get close. The men crept forward, rifles ready. 50 yards. 40. 30. Now! Both windows erupted in gunfire. Marla aimed and fired, the rifle kicking against her shoulder. She didn't know if she hit anything, just worked the bolt and fired again. One of the men in her field of view went down. The other dove behind a fallen log. From Rowan's side came the steady crack, crack, crack of his rifle, methodical and precise. "They're pulling back," he shouted. Marla looked out. The men were retreating, dragging their wounded. They disappeared into the trees, leaving a trail of blood in the snow. "Did we win?" she asked. "That was just them testing our defenses." Rowan was reloading, his movement smooth despite his injured shoulder. "Real attack comes after dark." He was right. As night fell, the temperature dropped. Inside the cabin, they kept the fire low. Enough for warmth, but not enough to provide light that would silhouette them in the windows. Marla ate cold beans from a tin, her rifle across her lap. "You scared?" Rowan asked. "Terrified." "Good. Fear keeps you alive." He was at the north window watching the darkness. "Just remember what I taught you. Breathe. Aim. Squeeze." "Rowan?" "Yeah? If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you. But if it does, the claim. Make sure it goes to someone who'll use it right. Not Victor. Not someone like him." He looked at her, his face half in shadow. "Nothing's going to happen to you," he repeated. "I didn't pull you out of Red Hollow just to lose you now." Before she could respond, glass shattered at the east window. A bottle-trailing flame arced through the opening, hitting the floor and exploding into fire. "They're burning us out!" Rowan grabbed a bucket, throwing water on the flames. More bottles came through other windows. Marla ran to help, beating at fires with a wet blanket. Smoke filled the cabin, making her eyes water. Gunfire erupted from outside, bullets punching through the walls. Splinters exploded near Marla's head. "Get down!" Rowan yelled. They dropped low, crawling to the windows. Marla could see muzzle flashes in the darkness, maybe 4 or 5 of them, all firing at once. She raised her rifle and returned fire blindly, just trying to make them keep their heads down. The attack lasted maybe 2 minutes. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Silence, broken only by crackling flames and their own harsh breathing. Rowan moved quickly, extinguishing the remaining fires. When he was done, he checked the damage. Several windows were broken. The east wall had at least 20 bullet holes, but the cabin itself was intact. "They'll try again," he said grimly. "Probably wait an hour. Let us think it's over, then hit us harder." Marla reloaded her rifle with shaking hands. "How many rounds do we have left?" "Enough, barely." They waited in darkness, every sense straining. An hour passed. Then another. Marla was starting to think maybe they'd given up when she heard it, a faint creaking sound, like weight on old boards. Someone was on the roof. She looked up just as the first chunk of sod fell through, someone digging through the turf and wood that covered the cabin. "Rowan!" "I hear it." He aimed his rifle at the ceiling and fired 3 times. A scream answered, followed by the thud of a body hitting the ground outside. But now there were men at the door, axes biting into the wood. The reinforcing beam held, but splinters flew with each impact. "The back window," Rowan ordered. "Go! Now!" Marla ran to the small window at the rear of the cabin. It was barely large enough to squeeze through, but Rowan had shown her the route. Out the window, into the lean-to, then circle around to flank anyone at the front door. She climbed through, dropping into snow that came up to her knees. The cold hit like a fist, stealing her breath. Behind her, the sounds of the door giving way. Rowan's rifle firing, his voice shouting something she couldn't make out. Marla ran, her boots slipping in the snow, the rifle clutched against her chest. She rounded the corner of the cabin just as 3 men burst through the shattered door. She didn't think, didn't hesitate. She raised the rifle and fired. The first man fell. The second turned toward her, bringing up his gun. She fired again. Missed. Worked the bolt. Fired a 3rd time. He went down. The 3rd man had made it inside, grappling with Rowan in the firelight. They crashed into the table, wood splintering. Marla ran forward, trying to get a clear shot. But they were moving too fast, locked together in vicious close combat. Then Rowan's knife flashed, and the man screamed, falling away. "Behind you!" Marla yelled. Rowan spun just as another attacker came through the door. The rifle in Rowan's hands cracked once, and the man dropped. Then silence. Marla stood in the doorway, her rifle still raised, her whole body shaking. The cabin was destroyed, furniture smashed, walls riddled with bullets, blood on the floor. But they were alive. Rowan leaned against the wall, breathing hard. His shoulder was bleeding again, fresh blood soaking through his shirt. "How many?" he asked. "I got 2 outside. You?" "3 in here." "That's 5. He moved to the window, looking out. "Where's number 6? As if in answer, a voice called from the darkness. "Vance! You listening?" Carson, the man from this afternoon. "I'm listening," Rowan called back. "My men are dead. This is done. I'm riding out. But I'm telling Victor what happened here. He'll send more. Understand? This ain't over." "Tell him to send an army," Rowan shouted. "Tell him we'll kill them too." The sound of a horse, galloping away into the night. Then finally, true silence. Marla lowered her rifle, her hand shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. She looked at the bodies on the floor, at the destruction around her, at Rowan's blood-soaked shirt. "We did it," she whispered. "We survived," Rowan corrected. "There's a difference." He was right, of course. This was just one battle. The war was far from over. But standing there in the ruined cabin, with snow drifting through the broken windows and the taste of gunpowder in her mouth, Marla felt something she'd never felt before. Not happiness, not safety. Power. She'd fought for her life and won. She'd looked death in the face and refused to blink. And she'd do it again if she had to. They spent that first night dragging bodies into the lean-to where the cold would preserve them until spring thaw made burial possible. Grim work made worse by the fact that Marla recognized one of the dead men, a drifter who used to drink at the saloon in Red Hollow, always polite, always tipped his hat to ladies. Now he was just dead weight in the snow, killed for Victor Hale's gold. "Don't think about who they were," Rowan said, reading her face. "Think about what they came here to do." But that didn't make it easier. By dawn, the cabin was as secure as they could make it. Broken windows covered with oiled canvas, bullet holes stuffed with rags. The shattered door reinforced with boards torn from the lean-to walls. It looked like exactly what it was, a fortification that had barely survived a siege. Rowan's shoulder was worse. The renewed bleeding had stopped, but infection crept back in, turning the skin around the wound hot and red. He tried to hide it, moving carefully to mask the pain, but Marla saw through the act. "You need a doctor," she said, for the 3rd time that morning. "Can't leave. Not until we know Victor's next move." He was cleaning rifles, hands moving with automatic precision, even as fever-bright eyes betrayed his condition. "Carson will report back. Victor will send more men, better prepared this time. We've got maybe 3 days before you die from infection?" She grabbed the rifle from his hands. "You're burning up, Rowan. Even I can see that." "I'll manage. You'll die." The words came out harder than she intended. "And then what? I survived this whole mess just to watch you bleed out because you're too stubborn to admit you need help?" He met her gaze, and for a moment something passed between them, an acknowledgement of how far they'd come together, how much had changed since that night in the Red Hollow saloon. "All right," he said finally, "but we do this smart. You ride to Copper Falls, bring back the doctor if he'll come. I stay here, hold the cabin. If Victor's men show up while you're gone, no." Marla's voice was flat. "I'm not leaving you here alone to die defending my claim. It's the only—" "I said no." She stood, pacing to the window. Snow had fallen heavy through the night, transforming the valley into something almost peaceful. Almost. "There's another way. We send word to Marshal Garrett, tell him what happened here, that we need help. He's got jurisdiction over the whole territory, right? He can send men. By the time they get here, I might be— Then we make sure you're still alive when they arrive." She turned back to him, jaw set. "I can ride to Copper Falls and back in 2 days if I push hard. You can last 2 days. Marla, can you last 2 days?" He studied her face, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, I can last 2 days." Then it's settled. She was already moving, gathering supplies. "I leave within the hour. You stay here, keep the fire going, drink water, change your bandages. And if anyone comes, anyone at all, you hide in the root cellar until they leave. The hell I will." "Rowan." She stopped, meeting his eyes. "I'm not asking." Something flickered across his face, surprise maybe, or recognition. The woman giving orders now wasn't the same one he'd bought off an auction block 2 months ago. "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly. She left before the sun was fully up, riding Rowan's roan gelding hard through snow that got deeper with every mile. The world was silent except for the horses breathing and the crunch of hooves breaking through ice crust. No birds. No wind. Just cold and white, and the knowledge that every minute mattered. The ride to Copper Falls took 18 hours, stopping only to rest the horse and force down food she couldn't taste. By the time she reached the town, her legs were numb and her face felt like frozen leather. Marshal Garrett was in his office, feet up on his desk, reading a newspaper. He took one look at her and stood. "Miss Whitaker, what happened?" She told him everything: the attack, the bodies, Rowan's infection, Carson's threat that more men were coming. Garrett's expression grew darker with each detail. "6 men dead," he said when she finished. "You're sure?" "5 dead. 1 ran. We didn't have a choice, Marshal. They were trying to burn us out." "I believe you." He moved to a cabinet, pulling out papers. "But this complicates things. Victor's been screaming about illegal detention, claiming we've got no evidence. His lawyer's been pushing for release, and the territorial judge is sympathetic. If his men are dead, and he can claim self-defense for them—" "Self-defense? They attacked us." "I know that. You know that. But in a courtroom with a good lawyer spinning the story?" Garrett shook his head. "Victor claims you stole his claim, that his men were trying to recover stolen property. Judge might believe it." Marla felt ice settle in her stomach. "He's going to get away with it. Not if I can help it. But I need you to understand, the law moves slow, and Victor's got money to make it move even slower." He grabbed his coat. "I'll send 2 deputies back with you, armed and official. That'll keep Victor's men from trying anything else, at least openly. And I'll get the doctor." "What about Victor?" "He stays locked up until the trial. That I can guarantee." Garrett opened the door. "Go get something to eat. We leave in an hour." The doctor, an older man named Hendricks with shaking hands and whiskey breath, wasn't happy about the trip, but agreed when Garrett made it clear refusal wasn't an option. The 2 deputies, younger men named Cole and Martinez, looked even less thrilled but checked their weapons and saddled up without complaint. They rode out as afternoon faded toward evening, pushing hard to make distance before dark. The deputies were quiet, professional, scanning the tree line constantly. Dr. Hendricks complained about the cold, about his horse, about the fact that mountain doctoring didn't pay enough for this kind of nonsense. Marla ignored him, focused on the trail ahead. They made camp at the halfway point, building a small fire and eating cold rations. Martinez took first watch while the rest tried to sleep. Marla couldn't. She kept thinking about Rowan alone in the cabin, fevered and weak. What if infection had spread? What if he'd collapsed and couldn't reach water or medicine? What if Victor's men had come back and found him defenseless? "He'll be fine," Cole said quietly from across the fire. "Rowan Vance is the toughest son of a bitch in the territory. Takes more than a bullet to put him down." "You know him?" "Know of him. Everybody does." Cole poked at the fire with a stick. "They say he fought in the war, did things that would make regular men go crazy. Came back here to get away from it all, live quiet. But quiet's got a way of finding trouble anyway. He didn't find this trouble. I brought it to him. Maybe. Or maybe he saw a chance to do something right and took it." Cole shrugged. "Either way, he chose to help you. That's on him, not you." They reached the valley the next afternoon. Marla's heart hammered as the cabin came into view, still standing, smoke rising from the chimney. A good sign, or at least not a terrible one. She dismounted before her horse fully stopped, running to the door. "Rowan!" No answer. She shoved the door open, scanning the dim interior. The cabin was empty, the cot vacant. Fear spiked through her chest. "Rowan!" A sound from below, the root cellar. She yanked open the trapdoor to find Rowan crouched in the darkness, rifle in his hands, eyes glassy with fever but focused. "Marla?" His voice was rough, uncertain. "That really you, or am I seeing things?" "It's me. I brought help." She reached down to help him up. "Come on, doctor's here." Dr. Hendricks examined Rowan with the brisk efficiency of someone who'd seen too many infected wounds to be squeamish. He cut away the soaked bandages, prodded the swollen flesh, and swore creatively. "Should have come to me a week ago," he muttered. "This is bad. Real bad. Infection spread to the muscle, probably into the blood by now." Can you fix it? Marla asked. Can I fix it? She asks. Can I fix it? Hendricks pulled instruments from his bag. I can try, but I'll need to debride the wound, cut away the dead tissue, and that's going to hurt like hell even with laudanum, and there's no guarantee it'll work. If the infection's too far gone, just do it, Rowan said. Your funeral. Hendricks uncorked a bottle of laudanum. Drink this. All of it. Marla held Rowan's hand while the doctor worked, feeling his grip tighten until her bones ached as the scalpel cut away infected flesh. Even drugged, Rowan's face contorted with pain, sweat pouring down his temples. The deputies waited outside, giving them privacy. Marla was grateful. This felt too intimate for strangers to witness. Rowan's weakness, his pain, her own desperate fear that this wouldn't be enough. Finally, Hendricks sat back, wiping his blade clean. Best I can do. Keep it clean, change bandages twice daily, and pray the fever breaks. If it doesn't, he didn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. That night, Cole and Martinez set up a watch rotation while Marla sat beside Rowan's cot, wiping his face with cool water as fever raged through him. He muttered in his sleep, fragments about the war again, about snow and blood and men screaming. You have to fight, she whispered. You hear me, Rowan Vance? You have to fight this. His hand found hers in the darkness, squeezing weakly. She stayed there all night, watching him breathe, counting each rise and fall of his chest like prayer. Dawn came gray and cold. The fever hadn't broken. Dr. Hendricks checked the wound, his expression grim. No worse, but no better either. We wait. The day crawled past. Marla forced herself to eat, to drink water, to pretend everything would be fine. The deputies maintained watch, scanning the valley for threats that didn't come. That evening, as she was changing Rowan's bandages, he opened his eyes, actually opened them, focused and clear. Hey, he said, his voice weak but steady. Hey yourself. She tried to smile. How do you feel? Like I got shot and then carved up by a drunk doctor. He heard that, Hendricks called from across the cabin. Good. Rowan's hand moved to his shoulder, probing gently. Did he get it all? He thinks so. Fever should break soon if he did. And if he didn't? Marla met his gaze. Then we deal with that when it comes. By the next morning, the fever had dropped. Not gone, but manageable. Rowan could sit up without passing out, could drink broth without vomiting. Dr. Hendricks declared it a minor miracle and promptly announced he was heading back to Copper Falls. Keep him in bed for at least a week, he ordered Marla. No riding, no heavy lifting, no getting shot. Think you can manage that? I'll do my best. After Hendricks left, escorted by Cole, Martinez remained behind. Marshal's orders, he explained. I stay until the trial or until relief arrives. Whichever comes first. We don't need a babysitter, Rowan said from the cot. With respect, sir, 5 dead men in your lean-to says otherwise. Martinez settled into a chair by the door. I'm staying. Having a deputy in the cabin changed things. Martinez was professional, kept to himself mostly, but his presence was a constant reminder that this wasn't over. That Victor was still out there, still dangerous, still coming for them one way or another. A week passed, then another. Snow fell heavy and constant, piling up until the valley was buried under 3 feet of white. The passes closed, isolating them completely. Rowan recovered slowly, regaining strength in increments. First sitting up, then standing, then walking around the cabin. His shoulder would never be the same, the scar tissue thick and ropey, mobility limited. But he'd live. That was enough. Marla spent the days maintaining the cabin, hunting for food, and practicing with the rifle. She'd become a decent shot out of necessity, but now she worked to become better. Every morning she'd trek out to the shooting range Rowan had set up, firing until her shoulder ached and her fingers went numb from cold. Martinez watched her practice one afternoon, arms crossed. You're good, he said when she hit a distant target 3 times in a row. Real good. Most men can't shoot like that. Most men haven't had to kill to stay alive. He nodded slowly. Fair point. That evening, as they ate dinner around the fire, Rowan spoke for the first time about what would happen next. Trial's set for January 15th, assuming the weather clears enough for the judge to make it to Copper Falls. He pushed food around his plate. You'll have to testify. Tell them everything. About your father, the debt, Victor's attempt to claim you. I know. They're going to ask about the men you killed. You have to be ready for that. Marla set down her fork. I am ready. Are you? Rowan's eyes were serious. Because a courtroom's different from a gunfight. They'll twist your words, make you doubt yourself. Victor's lawyer will paint you as a thief and a murderer. He'll say you seduced me into helping you steal his claim. Let him say it. The truth is the truth. Truth doesn't always win. Rowan leaned back. I've seen innocent men hang because the truth didn't sound good enough. Martinez spoke up. Marshal Garrett's gathering evidence. Witnesses from Red Hollow who saw what Victor did. Records of your father's claim filed under the false name. Even one of Victor's own men turned state's evidence in exchange for leniency. Which one? Marla asked. Carson. The one who ran from your cabin. Martinez smiled grimly. Turns out he's got a lot to say about Victor's operation. Claim jumping, murder for hire, bribing officials. This goes way deeper than just your father's gold. That was something, at least. But Marla had learned not to count on justice before it arrived. Christmas came and went, marked only by the date on the calendar. They had no decorations, no special food, just another day of surviving, another night of watching the valley for threats. January arrived with a thaw. The snow began to melt, revealing dead grass and frozen ground beneath. The passes opened enough for travel, and Martinez received word that the trial would proceed as scheduled. We leave in 3 days, he announced. Marshal wants everyone in Copper Falls well before the 15th to prepare. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Rowan insisted on coming despite his shoulder, wouldn't hear arguments about staying behind. They packed supplies, cleaned weapons, and went over Marla's testimony until she could recite it in her sleep. The night before they left, Marla stood on the porch watching stars emerge in the clear sky. Behind her, the cabin glowed with firelight, warm and solid and real. Rowan joined her, moving stiffly but under his own power. Nervous? He asked. Terrified. Good. He was quiet for a moment. Whatever happens in that courtroom, you should know. I'm proud of you. What you've become. She looked at him, this scarred mountain of a man who'd changed her entire life. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Sure you could have. Just would have taken longer. He smiled slightly. You were always strong, Marla. You just needed someone to stop telling you that you weren't. They stood there in comfortable silence, breathing cold air and listening to the creek burble under its skin of ice. Tomorrow, they'd ride to Copper Falls. Tomorrow, they'd face Victor Hale in court. Tomorrow, everything would change again. But tonight, they were home. The ride to Copper Falls took 2 days, the trail muddy with snowmelt. They arrived the evening of January 13th to find the town transformed. A circuit judge had arrived, along with lawyers, witnesses, and spectators drawn by the promise of a sensational trial. Marshal Garrett met them at the edge of town. Good timing. Victor's lawyer filed a motion to dismiss this morning, claimed insufficient evidence. Judge denied it, but it's going to be a fight. They took rooms at Patterson's again. That night, Marla tried to sleep but couldn't. Her mind kept spinning through everything that would happen tomorrow. The testimony, the cross-examination, Victor's cold eyes watching from the defendant's table. She was still awake at dawn when someone knocked on her door. It was Garrett, his face grim. We've got a problem. What kind of problem? Victor escaped, sometime during the night. Overpowered the guard, took his keys and gun. The marshal's jaw was tight with fury. He's in the wind. Marla's blood went cold. Where would he go? If he's smart, out of the territory entirely. But Victor's not smart. He's vengeful. Garrett's eyes met hers. He's coming for you, Miss Whitaker, and this time he won't send men to do it for him. They found Rowan in the hall, already dressed and armed. He'd heard the commotion. How long ago? He demanded. 4 hours, maybe 5. He's got a head start, but he doesn't know the country like you do. Garrett pulled out a map. If he's heading for the cabin, he is, Rowan said with certainty. He thinks that's where Marla feels safe. He'll go there to make a point. Then we set a trap. Marla's voice was steady, despite the fear coiling in her gut. We go back to the cabin, wait for him. End this. Too dangerous, Garrett said. We should keep you here, under guard. Where he can find me anyway. Where innocent people might get caught in the crossfire? She shook her head. No, this started at that cabin. It ends there too. Rowan was watching her, something unreadable in his expression. "You sure about this?" "I'm sure." They rode out within the hour. Marla, Rowan, Martinez, and 2 additional deputies Garrett insisted on sending. Fast horses, heavy weapons, and the grim knowledge that this would be the final confrontation one way or another. The cabin came into view as the sun reached its peak. Everything looked exactly as they'd left it, peaceful and still. But Marla's instincts, honed by months of survival, screamed danger. "He's already here," she said quietly. Rowan nodded. "Probably inside, waiting." Martinez and the deputies spread out, taking positions that covered all approaches. Rowan checked his rifle, wincing as the movement pulled at his healing shoulder. "Let me go first," Marla said. "No. He wants me. Let me draw him out." "Absolutely not." "Rowan." She met his eyes. "Trust me. I know what I'm doing." He didn't like it, that was clear, but after a moment, he nodded. Marla walked toward the cabin alone, her rifle held loosely but ready. Every sense was heightened, the crunch of her boots on frozen ground, the whisper of wind through pines, the hammer of her own heartbeat. "Victor," she called out, "I know you're in there. Come out and face me." Silence. Then the door opened, and Victor Hale stepped out. He looked different from the polished cattle baron she remembered. His hair was wild, his clothes dirty, his eyes holding a manic gleam. But the gun in his hand was steady enough. "Marla Whitaker," he said, voice almost conversational. "The woman who destroyed everything." "You destroyed yourself, Victor. I just survived it." "Survived?" He laughed, the sound bitter. "You stole my claim, killed my men, turned the whole territory against me, and now you stand there like you're the victim?" "I am the victim. My father's the victim. All those people you've hurt and threatened over the years, they're victims." Marla's hand stayed steady on the rifle. "You're just a bully who finally got caught." "Bully?" Victor's face darkened. "I built an empire in this territory. I own half these mountains, and you, a worthless, fat little nothing, you think you can just take that away?" The words that once would have cut deep barely registered now. "I'm not taking anything," she said calmly. "I'm just keeping what's mine." "It's not yours." Victor's gun came up, aimed at her chest. "None of it is yours. The claim, the cabin, even Vance. He only helped you out of pity. Can't you see that? You're nothing. You've always been nothing." Behind him, Marla saw movement in the cabin window. Rowan, circling around. "Maybe you're right," she said, keeping Victor's attention. "Maybe I am nothing. But I'd rather be nothing than be you." Victor's finger tightened on the trigger, and Marla dove sideways just as the gun fired, the bullet whining past where her head had been a moment before. She rolled, came up on one knee, and fired back. The shot went wide, but it made Victor duck. Then Rowan was in the doorway behind him, rifle raised. "Drop it, Hale!" Victor spun, firing wildly. One bullet caught Rowan in the leg, dropping him. But even falling, Rowan's aim was true. His shot hit Victor in the shoulder, spinning him around. Victor's gun fell from nerveless fingers. The deputies rushed in, weapons drawn. Martinez kicked Victor's gun away while the others covered him. Marla ran to Rowan, who was cursing steadily while gripping his bleeding leg. "How bad?" she asked. "Flesh wound. Hurts like hell, but I'll live." He looked past her to where Victor lay in the snow, bleeding and broken. "Is it over?" "Yeah," she said, watching the deputies secure Victor in chains. "It's over." But even as she said it, she knew that wasn't quite true. The fight was over. The threat was ended. But the aftermath would take time. Testimony, trials, legal battles over the claim. Still, the worst was behind them. Victor Hale was taken away in chains, screaming threats that everyone ignored. The trial proceeded 2 days later with a different defendant, Victor's remaining men, the ones who'd survived the various attacks, and decided cooperation was better than hanging. Marla testified for 3 hours, telling her story in clear, steady words. The defense tried to rattle her, suggesting she'd seduced Rowan, that she'd forged documents, that she'd murdered innocent men. She didn't flinch. When it was over, the jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty on all counts. Victor Hale was sentenced to 20 years in territorial prison. His empire was dismantled, his assets seized. The gold claim was officially registered to Marla Whitaker, daughter of Joseph Whitaker, legal heir to all properties and rights. She stood outside the courthouse as snow began to fall again, watching Victor being loaded into a prison wagon. He saw her watching and spat in her direction. "You're still nothing," he screamed. "You hear me? Nothing." Marla turned away without responding. She'd spent her whole life listening to people tell her what she was, what she wasn't, what she could never be. She was done listening. The lawyers came 3 weeks after the trial, arriving at the cabin in a fancy carriage that looked ridiculous navigating the mountain trail. 2 men in expensive suits and a woman with sharp eyes and a leather portfolio, all representing mining interests from San Francisco. Marla made them wait on the porch while she finished splitting firewood. Let them see what their money would be buying. Not some delicate flower who'd be grateful for their attention, but someone who'd earned every inch of ground she stood on. When she finally invited them in, Rowan was already at the table, his leg propped up and healing slowly. He'd refused the doctor's suggestion of a cane, said it made him look old. Now he just limped and pretended it didn't hurt. The lead lawyer, a man named Sutherland with silver hair and a practiced smile, spread papers across the table like he was dealing cards. "Miss Whitaker, we've come to make you an extraordinarily generous offer. Our geological surveys indicate your claim could be worth upwards of $800,000 over the next decade. We're prepared to offer you $200,000 cash right now for complete ownership." Marla looked at the papers without touching them. "That's a quarter of what you just said it's worth." "Well, yes, but extraction costs, equipment, labor, there are significant expenses involved. We're taking on all the risk." Sutherland's smile never wavered. $200,000 is more money than most people see in 10 lifetimes. You could live comfortably anywhere you chose, travel, see the world, leave this. He glanced around the cabin with poorly disguised distaste. "Behind. What if I don't want to leave this behind?" The smile faltered. "I'm sorry? What if I like it here? What if I want to work the claim myself?" The female lawyer, Mrs. Chen, no relation to the boarding house owner in Red Hollow, spoke up. "Miss Whitaker, with all respect, operating a mine requires extensive knowledge, significant capital investment, and frankly, a level of physical capability that a woman doesn't have," Marla cut her off. "That someone who looks like me couldn't possibly manage?" "I didn't say that." "You were thinking it." Marla stood, walking to the window. Outside, snow was melting in patches, revealing brown grass underneath. Spring was coming, whether the mountain was ready or not. "I appreciate you coming all this way, but the answer's no." Sutherland blinked. "Perhaps you didn't understand. $200,000. In cash. That's a lot of money for you to make $800,000. "I understand just fine." She turned back to face them. "My father died for that claim. Men tried to kill me for it. I'm not selling it so you can get rich while I become some story about the poor fat girl who got lucky and sold out." "Miss Whitaker, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. You're the ones who rode up here expecting me to be desperate enough or stupid enough to take your offer." Marla moved to the door, opening it. "We're done here." They left sputtering protests and thinly veiled warnings about how difficult it would be for her to operate independently. She watched their carriage bounce down the trail until it disappeared, then closed the door. Rowan was grinning. "You enjoyed that." "Maybe a little." She sat across from him. "They'll be back." "Probably. With a better offer next time." "I'll say no to that one, too." She met his eyes. "I meant what I said. I'm not selling." "So what are you going to do? Actually try to work it yourself?" "Why not? I've learned harder things in the past few months." Rowan studied her face, then nodded slowly. "All right. Then we need to make a plan." They spent the next week researching. Rowan had books on mining, geology, business management. His cabin library was more extensive than Marla had realized. She read until her eyes hurt, learning about hard rock extraction, about assaying ore quality, about hiring crews and managing operations. It was overwhelming, terrifying, exactly the kind of challenge she needed. In early March, they rode to the claim site with a surveyor Rowan knew from his trapping days. A grizzled man named Pike who'd seen every mountain in the territory and most of the gold in them. Pike spent 2 days examining the vein, taking samples, making notes in a battered journal. When he finished, he looked at Marla with something like respect. "Your father knew what he'd found," he said. "This is quality ore, high concentration. With proper equipment and experienced miners, you could pull out maybe 30,000–40,000 a year. Sustainable extraction done right. How much to set it up properly? 20,000 for equipment, another 10 for hiring a good crew and getting them out here. Then operating costs, food, supplies, maintenance. Pike squinted at the sky. You're looking at 40,000 initial investment, give or take. Marla's heart sank. She had maybe $300 to her name. The rest was tied up in a claim she couldn't work without money she didn't have. There's another option, Pike continued. You could lease extraction rights. Find a company willing to pay you a percentage of profits in exchange for doing the work. You'd make less overall, but you'd avoid the risk and the overhead. How much less? Maybe a third of total value, but it's guaranteed income with no investment on your part. A third was still a fortune, enough to live comfortably for the rest of her life. But it meant giving up control, trusting someone else to honor their agreement. I need to think about it, she said. That night, back in the cabin, she and Rowan talked through options. He was careful not to push, just presenting facts and letting her decide. The lease option makes sense, he said. It's safe, steady income. You could build a life anywhere you wanted. But you didn't fight this hard just to hand control over to someone else. He poked at the fire. Whatever you choose, though, I'll help however I can. Marla watched flames dance, thinking about her father working that claim in secret, about the life he'd imagined for her before someone killed him for gold. I want to work it myself, she said finally, even if it takes years to save up the money for equipment, even if it's harder. I want to do it right. Then we'll figure it out. Rowan's voice was matter-of-fact, like they were planning a garden instead of a mining operation. Money can be borrowed. There's banks that loan on proven claims. Banks that'll take one look at me and laugh. Banks that'll take one look at Pike's survey and see profit. He smiled slightly. And if they don't, there's other ways. I've got some money saved. Not enough for everything, but enough to start. She stared at him. You've already given me $1,200. I can't. It's an investment. You pay me back from profits, with interest if it makes you feel better. He shrugged. Besides, what else am I going to spend it on? I live in a cabin in the mountains and eat beans most nights. Rowan, Marla. His voice was gentle but firm. You saved my life at least 3 times that I can count. Let me help save your future. Call us even. She wanted to argue, to insist she could do it alone, but the truth was she couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And there was no shame in accepting help from someone who'd proven again and again that he had her best interests at heart. All right, she said, but we do this as partners. Equal split on profits until you're paid back with interest. Then 70-30 my favor. 60-40, he countered. I'll be doing half the work. 55-45. Final offer. They shook on it, his scarred hand engulfing hers. The next 3 months were a blur of activity. Rowan took his savings, nearly $8,000 hidden in the cabin's walls, money from years of trapping and living cheap, and combined it with a loan Marla secured from a bank in Denver. The loan officer had been skeptical until she'd shown him Pike's survey, then suddenly became very friendly. They hired a crew of 6 miners, experienced men willing to work remote for good wages, bought equipment, drills, carts, timber for shoring up tunnels, built a bunkhouse near the claim site and a storage shed for ore. Marla worked alongside the men, learning the business from the ground up. At first they were skeptical. A woman owner was unusual enough, but one who actually got her hands dirty. But she proved herself quickly. She could lift as much as most of them, work as long, and wasn't afraid to crawl into tight spaces or handle explosives. By June, they were pulling ore out of the mountain. Not much at first, just a few £100 a week. But it was real, tangible proof that this could work. The first payment came in August, $3,000 after expenses. Marla stared at the bank draft like it might disappear if she looked away. That's yours, Rowan said. Your share. Our share. She divided it, handing him half. Partners, remember? They fell into a routine. Marla spent 4 days a week at the mine, learning operations and managing the crew. The other 3 days she spent at the cabin, handling paperwork, planning future expansion, and learning everything she could about running a business. Rowan split his time between helping at the mine and maintaining the cabin. His shoulder had healed mostly, though it still gave him trouble in cold weather. The leg wound left him with a permanent limp. He said it added character. One evening in late September, as they sat on the porch watching stars emerge, Rowan spoke quietly. You know, people in Copper Falls are talking. People always talk. They're saying we're together, living in sin. He didn't look at her. Figured you should know, in case it matters. Marla considered this. A few months ago, such gossip would have mortified her. Now it seemed almost quaint. Does it bother you? She asked. Not particularly, but it might affect your reputation, your business. My reputation is that I killed 5 men defending my claim and sent Victor Hale to prison. I don't think living in sin is going to make it worse. She paused. Does it bother you? No. He was quiet for a moment. But I don't want you to feel trapped. You've got money now, options. You could leave, build a life somewhere else. Somewhere people don't know your history. I could. Marla looked out at the valley, at the mountains rising dark against the starlit sky. But why would I want to? Because you deserve better than this. Better than a broken-down mountain man and a life of hard work. Rowan. She waited until he looked at her. You saved my life. You taught me to be strong. You gave me a chance when the whole world had written me off. And you never once asked for anything in return except that I keep fighting. She reached over, taking his hand. This cabin, this valley, this life, it's not settling, it's choosing, and I choose this. His fingers tightened on hers. You sure? I've never been more sure of anything. They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the night deepen. The mine continued producing steadily through fall. By October, they'd paid off the bank loan and started turning real profit. Marla hired 3 more miners, expanded the operation, and began planning for spring when they'd sink a second shaft to reach a deeper vein Pike had identified. She also started giving money away. First to Mrs. Patterson in Copper Falls, whose boarding house had sheltered them when they needed it most. Then to families in Red Hollow, whose debts Victor had held and called in over the years. Small amounts mostly, enough to make a difference without being charity. Some people were grateful. Others were suspicious, couldn't understand why the fat girl who'd been auctioned off like property was now handing out money. Marla didn't care what they understood. In November, she rode to Red Hollow for the first time since that night in the saloon. The town looked smaller than she remembered, shabbier. Or maybe she'd just gotten bigger. She stopped first at the general store, where old Mr. Thornwell, the banker who'd stood by while Victor tried to claim her, was buying tobacco. He saw her and went pale. Miss Whitaker, I heard you were rich? She smiled sweetly. Yes. Turns out my father's worthless daughter inherited a fortune. Funny how things work out. He stammered something and fled. Next she went to the saloon. Same room where she'd stood on the auction block. Same scarred bar. Same smell of whiskey and desperation. The bartender recognized her. Miss Whitaker, can I get you something? Information. She leaned against the bar. I'm looking to hire people. Cooks, laundresses, maintenance workers for the mine, good wages, fair treatment. You know anyone who needs work? Word spread fast. By evening, she'd conducted a dozen interviews in that same saloon, hiring 5 people, including Sarah Chen, daughter of the boarding house owner who'd evicted her months ago. Sarah was nervous, couldn't quite meet Marla's eyes. I'm sorry about what my mother did, kicking you out when you needed help. Your mother did what she had to do to protect her business. I don't blame her. Marla handed over a paper with job details. But I'm giving you a chance to make your own choices. Take it or don't. Sarah took it. That night, riding back to the cabin under a moon so bright it cast shadows, Marla realized something had fundamentally shifted. Red Hollow wasn't home anymore. Maybe it never had been. Home was a cabin in a valley, with a man who'd taught her strength and a life she'd built from nothing. Winter came hard and fast, dumping 4 feet of snow in a week and closing the passes completely. The mine shut down for the season, the crew paid off and sent to warmer territories until spring. Marla and Rowan settled into the quiet rhythm of winter isolation. Days spent maintaining equipment, evenings reading or talking by the fire, nights when the cold was so intense it made the cabin walls crack. One night in January, almost exactly a year after Victor's trial, Marla was reviewing account books when Rowan spoke. I've been thinking about what comes next. She looked up. Next? For you. The mine's profitable. You've got steady income. You could expand even more if you wanted. But I wonder if you've thought about what you actually want your life to look like. I'm living what I want it to look like. Are you? Or are you just so busy surviving and building that you haven't stopped to ask yourself what happiness looks like? He set down his book. Because you've earned the right to be happy, Marla. Not just successful, not just safe, actually happy. She thought about that. The question itself felt strange, almost foreign. Happiness had never been something she'd considered pursuing. Survival, yes. Proving people wrong, absolutely. But happiness? I don't know, she admitted. I never thought I had the right to ask for that. Well, you do. So I'm asking, what would make you happy? Marla looked around the cabin, at the life they'd built together. At Rowan, this complicated man who'd saved her and taught her and somehow become the most important person in her world. This, she said simply, this makes me happy. This cabin specifically, the mine, the territory, you. The word came out before she could stop it, but she didn't take it back. You make me happy. Working with you, living with you, building something together. I don't need fancy houses or society approval or anything else. I just need, she gestured helplessly, this. Rowan was very still. You sure about that? I'm not exactly a prize. Scarred up, damaged, more comfortable with mountains than people. And I'm fat, opinionated, and killed 5 men last year. We're quite a pair. She smiled. But I've never felt more myself than when I'm with you. Never felt more capable or strong or just enough. He crossed the room, knelt beside her chair. Up close, she could see every line on his face, every scar, the gray starting to thread through his hair. I love you, he said simply. Probably have since you climbed through that crack in the cave wall, even though you were terrified. Maybe before, but I didn't want to say it until you were ready to hear it. I'm ready. Her hand came up to his face, tracing the scar on his temple. I love you too, even though you're a stubborn, overprotective mountain man who thinks he knows what's best for everyone. Especially me. Especially you. They married in March, a small ceremony in Copper Falls, with Marshal Garrett officiating and Pike as witness. No fancy dress. Marla wore sturdy wool that fit her strong frame, and no pretense of society approval. Afterward, they rode back to the cabin and got to work. The mine reopened with the spring thaw, producing better than ever. They hired more people, expanded operations, and started planning a second claim Pike had identified 20 miles north. Life settled into something Marla had never imagined possible. Work that mattered, a partner who saw her clearly, and a future she was building with her own hands. But not everything was smooth. In May, a letter arrived from San Francisco. Victor Hale had died in prison, stabbed by another inmate during a fight. The news should have brought relief, but instead Marla felt oddly empty. You all right? Rowan asked, watching her face. I thought I'd feel something. Glad maybe, or vindicated. But I just feel tired. She set the letter aside. He spent his whole life chasing power and money, and in the end it got him killed in a prison yard. What a waste. Some people never learn that power over others isn't the same as power over yourself. She thought about that, about how much energy she'd wasted over the years trying to be what others expected. How much of her life had been shaped by other people's cruelty or indifference. I'm done with that, she said. Done defining myself by what I'm not or what I've overcome. From now on, I'm just going to be who I am. And who's that? Marla considered. A year ago, she would have struggled to answer. Would have listed off all her failures and inadequacies, all the ways she didn't measure up. Now? Someone strong, someone capable, someone who builds things instead of tearing them down. She met his eyes. Someone who chooses her own path, whatever anyone else thinks about it. That summer, the mine produced its most profitable quarter yet. Marla used some of the money to build a real house near the claim. Not fancy, but solid and comfortable, with room for the family she and Rowan were starting to think about. She also established a fund for women in difficult circumstances, administered through Marshal Garrett. Women facing debts they couldn't pay, abusive situations, or just bad luck. They could apply for help, not charity, but opportunity. A chance to build something better. The first recipient was a widow from Red Hollow with 3 children and a farm she couldn't work alone. The fund paid for hired help until her oldest son was big enough to take over. The second was a young woman whose father had gambled away everything she owned. The fund bought her a train ticket to Denver and 6 months of living expenses while she learned bookkeeping. Small things, maybe. But Marla remembered what small acts of help had meant when she'd had nothing. In September, Pike brought news of another strike. This one even bigger than the first, on the northern claim they'd been developing. "You're going to be very rich," he said, showing her the survey. Very, very rich. Marla looked at the numbers and felt nothing but a strange detachment. Money had stopped meaning what it once did. It was just a tool now, a way to build the life she wanted and help others do the same. "Good," she said. "We'll need it for the school." Pike blinked. "School?" "The mining camp's growing. 20 families now and more coming. Their kids need education." She pointed at the map. "There's good flat ground near the creek. We'll build a schoolhouse, hire a teacher, make it real. That'll cost, I know what it'll cost. We'll do it anyway." By the end of the year, the school was built. A simple one-room building with real desks and a slate board and books ordered from San Francisco. Miss Ellen Warren, a teacher from Ohio looking for adventure, arrived in December and immediately started planning curriculum. The first day of school, Marla stood outside watching children file in. Miners' kids, ranging from 6 to 15, all chattering excitedly. She saw herself in some of their faces, the ones who looked uncertain or scared, the ones who probably weren't sure they belonged. "They'll have a better chance than we did," Rowan said beside her. "That's the idea." They walked back to their house, home, Marla had started calling it, because it was, and found letters waiting. One from the territorial governor, praising her business acumen and asking if she'd consider advising on mining policy. Another from a women's suffrage organization in Denver, inviting her to speak about economic independence. Marla read them both and set them aside. Maybe someday. But for now, she had enough to do right here. That evening, she and Rowan sat on their porch watching the sunset behind the mountains. 2 years ago, she'd been standing in a saloon, waiting to be auctioned off like property. Worthless, everyone had said. A burden, unmarriageable. Now she owned 2 profitable claims, employed over 30 people, and was helping build a community from scratch. "You know what I learned?" she said quietly. "What's that?" "Strength isn't about being what other people expect. It's about deciding who you are and then becoming that person, no matter what anyone says." She reached for his hand. "Everyone told me I was too weak, too fat, too broken to matter, and I believed them for a long time, but you showed me different." "I didn't show you anything. You were always strong. You just needed someone to stop telling you that you weren't." "Maybe, but you were that someone." She squeezed his fingers. "You paid a fortune for a woman everyone else called worthless, and you never asked for anything except that I believe in myself. Best $1,200 I ever spent." They sat in comfortable silence as stars began to appear. Somewhere in the valley, the mine crew was singing, rough voices carrying a folk song across the cooling air. The school bell rang, calling children home for dinner. Life, messy and real and beautiful, unfolding around them. Marla thought about her father, wondered if he could see what she'd built from the claim he'd died protecting. Hoped he'd be proud. She thought about Victor Hale, rotting in an unmarked prison grave, and felt only pity. He'd had everything, money, power, respect, and thrown it away chasing more. Died alone and hated because he'd never learned that strength came from lifting others up, not tearing them down. She thought about the girl she'd been 2 years ago, terrified and convinced of her own worthlessness. Wished she could go back and tell that girl what was coming, that the worst night of her life would lead to the best years, that survival was just the beginning. But mostly, she thought about tomorrow, about the mine expanding, the school growing, the community they were building together, about the life she'd chosen, the man beside her, the future stretching out like an unmapped valley. "Rowan? Yeah? Thank you. For everything. For saving me, teaching me, loving me. For seeing something in me when no one else could." He turned to look at her, his scarred face gentle in the fading light. "You don't need to thank me for seeing what was always there. You just needed time to see it yourself." Maybe he was right. Maybe she'd always had this strength buried somewhere deep, waiting for the right circumstances to emerge. Or maybe strength was something you built, piece by piece, through trial and error and refusing to quit even when quitting seemed like the only option. Either way, she was here now, strong, capable, certain of who she was and what she wanted. And what she wanted was this: the mountain, the mine, the life they'd built together. The chance to prove that worth wasn't measured by appearance or by other people's approval, but by what you did with the chances you were given. The night deepened around them, cold and clear and full of stars. Tomorrow there would be work, the mine, the school, 1,000 details of building a life. But tonight, Marla Vance, no longer Whitaker, no longer the worthless girl from Red Hollow, sat on her porch with the man she loved and felt something close to complete. Not perfect. Life was never perfect. Her body still carried the weight others had mocked. Her hands were still scarred from work. She still woke sometimes from nightmares of that night in the saloon, of Victor's men attacking the cabin, of all the moments when she'd nearly lost everything. But she'd survived. More than survived. She'd won. Not because she'd defeated her enemies, though she had. Not because she'd gotten rich, though she was getting there. She'd won because she'd become someone she could respect. Someone strong enough to stand when the world expected her to fall. Someone brave enough to choose her own path when every voice said she couldn't. That was worth more than all the gold in the mountains. Rowan stood, offering his hand. "Come on, getting cold." She took it, letting him pull her to her feet. Together they went inside, to the warmth and light and life they'd built from nothing. Behind them, the valley settled into darkness. Above, stars wheeled across an infinite sky. And in a small house on the edge of the wilderness, a woman who'd been told she was worthless proved every one of them wrong. Not with words, with a life well lived.